morning, Oneness. Good morning. How are you this morning? And good morning to all our viewers. Welcome. We certainly welcome you. And good morning. I'm sort of coming back into oneness with all of you at the moment here as we start out. There's a quote. Ernest Holmes had a way of saying, in talking about power, and one of the things he said is there is a power for good in the universe, and we can use it for definite purpose. And he's rephrased that in a number of different places. So, for example, he has said, God has given us power, and we must use it. So he said we can use it, we must use it, and I think both mics are on, just so I'm aware. And what we really know in practicing this philosophy, and what we know from other spiritual traditions from which we have borrowed some of our concepts, is that we are always using it. But the question is, are we using it mindfully? And as we learn this spiritual tradition, as we practice the principles of science of mind, and as Jesus said, it is done to us as we believe, then that provokes the thought of, well, what are we believing? Because if thought is creative, and thought is powerful. And so we are always using it in how we are thinking and what we are creating and what we are bringing forth. But now, wait a minute. My talk title for today was, Who Owns a Share of My Mind? How do these two come together? Well, that's going to be fun to unpeel and unpack today. So let's start by thinking about our own human brain. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so we're going to go at this very simply. When we think of our brain, yeah, there are parts that light up if we're happy, if we're sad, if we're angry. There are parts that light up when we are satisfied, right? But in our common language, we know that there are two basic areas in our brain, and we commonly refer to it as our left brain and our right brain, right? And sometimes we're more in one side than the other, and we see that, or we can detect that in the way we're showing up in the world. One is more logical, one is more feeling or intuitive, for example. But you know what? It's one brain. Even though there may be different parts of it, and which one we're relying on and showing up from in any given moment, it is one brain that is ours, correct? So let's transfer that and think about human life. Because I know this is a simplification, but it's a simplification that we use all the time. And this, as spiritual beings having a human experience, we're in two realms already, just by that frame of reference, right? I'm going to put this down. Okay. Well, that way I can see past it as well. So as human beings having as spiritual beings having a human experience, we've already reduced it to two dimensions. And I think we are more multidimensional than we realize and give ourselves credit for. But let's stay with two for this morning. And from a spiritual standpoint, we talk about the external realm, the outer world, right? And we also know that there's an inner world, and that we can be internally sourced and referenced, right? So let's look at those a little bit deeper. When we think of that outer realm, I personally, my shorthand for it is, I call it 3D. So for today, if you hear me say 3D, I'm talking about that outer world. And that outer world is physical. It's form. It's experience, right? It's what, when I see each of you, the first thing that I am perceiving is your physical form. Hearing your voice, perhaps the scent of your aroma, your energy, but it's something that we relate to on a physical basis, and how we act and how we believe. And it's interesting that mind and power have a place in the physical realm. So a lot of times power in that outer world, the way humans have conceived it and have said, okay, well, this is the way it works. And that's sort of like disempowering ourselves, giving away our power when we say, well, that's the way it's always been, right? Because what we're choosing to do is relinquish responsibility and not make a choice. Well, that's the way it's always been, so why bother? But the power in the physical realm tends to be outside, and it tends to be one in which, to be honest, as humans, we all have certain things that we want. We all want to be loved and experience love. We all want to be heard and understood. And we all want some level of power. Now, the power that one may want versus another may differ from being maybe a subject matter authority or leading a corporation or being a top athlete and the power and recognition that garners. We all have that desire in different ways of manifestation, but we all choose it to some degree. So I'm not talking about how much power and that we all should go for the same amount, but rather that even if we may want different amounts of power, the key thing is we certainly have a sense of when we feel disempowered or when we've lost it, right? And that's part of what triggers us, because we say, well, wait a minute. I feel I don't have power here, right? So where does that come from? In part, it comes from our mind. Now, the 3D power is often based on control, fear, force, divide and conquer, and all of those are so wonderful, aren't they? Don't we cozy up to that? Now, if we want to be honest with ourselves, there are times if we observe, we might catch ourselves out dabbling in some of that as our way of getting our way in the world. Manipulating, for example, is one way of doing that. And in that 3D realm, most of our thoughts are referencing something outside of us. It's what's familiar to us, right? It's what we've grown up in. We've been taught by our parents, our families, our schools, our social place in the world, where we work, and all of those social constructs have sort of taboos. And what do those taboos do? They have the effect of keeping us in line, don't they? And so we want to think we may be free thinkers, but at the same time, are we? So when we go into the metaphysical, which is that other major realm, that inner sourced realm, our power is different. Ernest Holmes indicated power is. Now, a lot of times we have judgments about power, don't we? We have different stories we make up about it, and we have judgments about it, and that might even distance us from our willingness to be powerful, to show up in a powerful way because of those judgments that we make about it. And those judgments are how we are thinking about power, how we're conceptualizing it, how it gets used through how we see other people use it. But in the metaphysical realm, power is, period. It's neutral. Electricity is, it's neutral. It's how we make use of it that starts to translate into whether we are doing good with it or doing something else with it. In the metaphysical realm, practicing the principles of science of mind, what we believe is that we are aligned with spirit. We are aligned with that one infinite, absolute power, infinite and eternal, everywhere present, in every moment. That's where we are lined up. And as Rebecca said in her prayer this morning, We are that power. We are God in expression. If God is the absolute power and we are God in expression, we have at our command, should we choose to align with it, we are partnered with that absolute power. That's a very different sense of power and empowerment, because that is a birthright we have spiritually. That we are fully empowered to the extent that we align with it, accept it, and choose it. And then it becomes a question of what are we doing with it? So I want to introduce the thought. How many of you have heard the expression market share? A few of you? It's typically a business concept. And what it means is, if you're a company and you're selling your product or service, what proportion of the market do I command? My sales are what percentage of all the sales for this type of product in the world? That's what market share is. And I want to introduce a different application of that, sort of change the wording up a bit. And let's think about mind share. So who owns what percentage of your mind share? We're thinking external and internal. Mind share becomes sort of an interesting concept that we can sort of think about like market share. And how might we, what businesses do is they're always looking for more market share, right? They want to increase sales. They want to command the market. They want to be the market leader. And so let's think about that from the spiritual side then. Who's owning my mind share? How is that orienting me in terms of how I'm showing up, how I'm responding, and what I'm doing, and how I am choosing my power, or to keep it or give it away? So let's break this down a little bit. In the 3D outer world, and how do we know when we're in one side or the other? Isn't that the real key?
Yes.
How do I know if I'm breathing air or breathing water? Right? How do I know the difference of whether I'm in 3D or in the metaphysical realm? Well, for one thing, in the 3D realm, the focus is on, in terms of mind share, the focus is on what to, the focus and the way they go about it is to impress on us what we should think. Now, we know in Science of Mind, we're not telling you what to think, but we do work with how to think, how to use mind mindfully. So here's one way of sort of saying, am I breathing air? Am I breathing water? Is the impress on my mind telling me what to think, what to buy, what to believe, what to feel. I notice all these headlines in newsletters. What you need, what you must have, right? It's a real setup there for telling you what, not how. And it's from the outside. So how does it show up today? We see it showing up more and more. And it's really important that we understand this. We know that very powerful function of social media now, more than ever before. And this can be in the business realm, but it can also be in other realms. Look at what pharmaceutical has done. I remember several years ago commenting to my son, 20 years ago, there were no such things as pharmaceutical ads on television. And he had some of his friends in the room, and they looked at me like I was an alien from some other planet. What? Because they had grown up with this as the new normal. So here's the pharmacy industry, continually battering us with what to think, what to buy. So it comes through social media, it comes through ads, it comes through political speeches, it comes through candidates who are preparing for office and trying to garner market share of the voter, right? And how do they do that? Through garnering mind share of the voter. And in the 3D realm, what is power doing? Because these two are working together, mind and power. Typically, there's this undercurrent of teaching us disempowerment. You know, when the pharmaceutical company when we run into one of those ads, what are they really basically saying? You have a health issue that you cannot control and you cannot solve, but we have the solution for you by this.
With a lot of side effects.
With a lot of side effects. And we buy it anyway, right? Or take, for example, we've been watching as the government has been rolling back pollution regulations on air and water. And there's this belief system out there, well, that we cannot regulate pollution created by corporations or they won't profit. And now somehow they're getting away with relaxing regulations because somehow we've all said, yeah, I guess that must be right. And we've remained quiet about it. But let's examine that. How is that empowering us or disempowering us? And what are our choices that we can have in that regard? So power is often used in that outer realm to sort of disempower us by saying only we can do this. You're not able to do it on your own. Only we know how, because you wouldn't have a problem if you knew how to do it. And if you try and do it on yourself, you're going to fail, because only we have the answer. Does that feel powerful? Typically not. So let's then go over to the spiritual realm, the metaphysical realm, because we'll look at mind and power very differently. As I said earlier, we focus on how to think. Now, we do that as a belief system, that we are about how to think and that we are empowered when we are thinking mindfully. And we've talked about this before in the sense that when we're just sort of sleepwalking, when we're on default, we're still creating, we're just going on what we've been taught before without really clicking into, well, now wait a minute. Do I really want to reinforce this and repeat this, or do I want to change it up this time? And it's also a factor of sort of like, what story have I built? But I'm the one that built the story. I'm the one that spun the story based on something that happened outside. And so we have the ability to choose to think differently. And in fact, that is where our power is. Our power is when we are aligned with the absolute. And our power is when we are choosing to make choice. So we know that that absolute power is infinite wisdom. And when we ask for clarity, when we ask for guidance, it does come. And we can choose differently. Now, then it becomes the question, and we've talked about this, about how do we do this? So when we get triggered, we know when we're triggered, right? We do. We know when something's got us triggered. And then it becomes, what do we do about it? We can either go along with it and just grumble and get more and more agitated and angry, which isn't solving anything and is not realigning us with our power and with possibility. So I want to give you an example from some of our recent sacred activism meetings. And we've been talking about power to some extent, but in March, everybody that came to the meeting walked in the door angry, upset, anxious, fearful, alarmed about something that was going on in the country. And we all realized that we've been feeling this acutely for several weeks. And it was just hot. It was at the top, and everybody was on the same issue. So we talked about it. And where we go is we honor, yeah, I need to recognize what's going on inside. But then it becomes that place of power. Am I wanting to just keep going the way it is, or what else can I do? And oftentimes we feel disempowered out in the world, especially when it's a bigger than me issue, when there's structure and organization and big entities involved. But that's a choice, that is a belief system, that's a story we've told ourselves, right? That in itself. Because we know that as we change, the world changes. And the world doesn't change unless we do. And what we do, what the choice we make, that ripple, when you drop a stone in the water, that ripple that goes out to all of us in some way or form, in fashion. So in this particular case, and this is often what we do, because I've talked about this in some of the power talks, is let's choose a higher thought. And that becomes our high watch, that we adhere to that higher thought. And somebody in the meeting said something very interesting. This person said, you know, when I am at peace, when I go into meditation and spiritual practice, and I get into that peaceful place, I just want to hover there. I just want to let it fully absorb me and me be absorbed in it and be just enjoying that blissful place. When I'm in that place of peace, I don't feel like doing something. They seem antithetical. They seem like opposites. But what we'd done is we had been honest about what was triggering us. We had developed some affirmative high watch concepts. And when we went into spiritual practice together, where two or more are gathered, there is far greater power. Yes. And when we went into that spiritual practice together, something really powerful happened. We all felt it. And afterwards, one person, the person who was talking about peace, said, for the first time ever in my life, I was at peace and I felt like I was doing something. Because in our power, in our alignment, in our use of mind, our mind, going for absolute own market share, mind share, and doing that together, we do something. There is a place where being and doing are one and the same. And that is so important to know. In any moment, we have a choice to make. In every moment, we have the power of the choice that we are making, and to make it mindfully. And so, I leave you this morning knowing that you are all powerful. You are all thinkers, and you are all creative. And it's up to each and every one of us. And as we unite in a higher knowing together and continually and consistently affirm that, we do make a difference. So I invite you to join me in this affirmative prayer. We let our hearts synchronize, and we breathe together. And we breathe together. That sacred breath of life, that sacred breath that reminds us with every heartbeat and every breath that we are one with the one. That one power, one presence, one life, absolute, infinite, eternal, and everywhere present in every moment, in every situation. That this is the source of our being. It is the source of all that matters. And as God in expression, we are powerful beyond realization. We are powerful and always empowered. It is ours to choose. And so we do so with a greater good, a greater joyous expectancy, a positive expectancy. And as we come together and know together that we are powerful and that we are in God's mind share, we are God mind share in expression. And we are the place where this stands forth in the world. And so we are always empowered, always choosing, always aware, and always coming together in community, in togetherness, into that oneness, alignment that is ever more powerful. And we know that we do make a difference. And so forevermore, we release any idea that we are powerless. For it is always our truth of being, always our sacred honor, and always aligned with that power that we can use and we must use. Blessed be, grateful we are, allowing, receiving, and accepting and being this truth forevermore forward. And so it is.
So it